All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob, and here he is. He is my friend and brother, Jacob Prash, on the other side of the Atlantic. How you doing, Jacob?
Well, I'm looking up, waiting for him to come back. But I
Amen.
know certain things have to happen first. The Lord has said, fasten your seatbelts, pray, and redeem the time while you can. He is coming.
That's right. That's right. So, Jacob, we got Labor Day weekend coming up, and you were telling me earlier that England has a similar one, but that was last week. I don't think a lot of folks from America know about that one. What's it called?
It's called Bank Holidays, August or Summer Bank Holiday. And that's culturally the British equivalent of Labor Day weekend.
What do people do? Was it just like similar here?
Yeah, it's a long weekend, long holiday weekend. People don't have to work on the Monday. Most businesses and things are closed, banks are closed. So people would be like the last weekend at the beach, or if something like that, if they go to Brighton or Blackpool or something like that, which is like going to the New Jersey shore or going down to Laguna on the West Coast, something like that.
Yeah, I always wanted to know this. Just real quick, just food for thought. Here, obviously on the West Coast, people go to Newport Beach, people go to Huntington Beach, people go to Santa Monica. I mean, what would be the beach to go to if I was in England? If I were to go there, what would that be? What would be the popular thing to do on a holiday?
The British beaches are not like American beaches because the water is generally colder, except in Cornwall where you get the Gulf Stream, and Cornwall is rather far from London and so forth. So that's the only place you really get the really warm water would be Cornwall. The beaches are quite cold. People will run in the water and run out, but you won't see the kind of swimming and things that you see in Maui or in, again, Laguna Beach or in Fort Lauderdale Beach or Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or Jones Beach, New York. It's not like that. But there are Victorian traditions of people who have these little huts along the beach, and they do barbecues and cookouts and things of this nature.
Nice.
Enjoy the sunshine kind of thing. But the water, you're in and out. There's not a lot of swimming or things like that.
Even in the summer?
Not a lot. It's just too cold.
Yeah. Okay. Even in the summertime?
Even in the summertime.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Cornwall in the summer, Cornwall's an exception.
Okay. I heard Essex has a good beach. Is that true?
There are beaches in Essex, yeah, but I mean, look, if you've been to Maui, or if you've been to Laguna, or if you've been to Palm Beach, Florida, you wouldn't consider the British beaches to be in any way comparable to those beaches. British people wanting those beaches, they go to the Mediterranean. They go to the Costa del Sol in Spain. If they're working class, if they're middle class, they will go to the beaches in the south of France, the Riviera, or maybe the Italian Riviera. So people who are looking for that kind of sun and surf type beaches that you have in the United States, they take package holidays to Europe. Some go to Algarve in Portugal. Some go to the Costa del Sol in Spain. Some go to the south of France or Italian Riviera. Some go to Cyprus.
Really?
So they head to the Mediterranean.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Good to know. It just we're so
you don't have people much now going to the beach for a vacation, like people renting bungalows at the New Jersey shore or something like that. You don't have much of that in England. It's more day trips. Beaches are more day trips or overnights or something like that. And it's a bit of a step back in time. Like if you go to Blackpool, which is the main one in the north of England, they still have America has theme parks. England still has some amusement parks at the beach, the big roller coasters and things like this. But it's a day out type of a beach. It's not a beach you'd go to for a holiday. I'm going to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for 2 weeks. It's not like that.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jacob, if this Bible teacher thing doesn't work out, you could always be a tour guide there.
Yeah, I guess so.
Explained it very well. So there we go. Jacob, just you're going to be here in the States. Speaking of Labor Day here in the United States, you're going to come out here. You're going to be on the East Coast. You're going to move to the West Coast, and you're going to go back to the Midwest, and then head back home. We're looking forward to seeing you. You're going to be in New York.
Yes.
You're going to be in New York at the Open Door Church. So that's going to be fun. Last time you were there was 3 years ago.
Before COVID. Before COVID.
Awesome. Awesome. So looking forward to have you here in California on the 17th and 18th. We just, you're so hard to get that we were able to finally convince you to come to the States. I'm only kidding, but we were able to get a teaching day on Saturday. And you're going to be doing here in Devore, you're going to be doing how to understand the Old Testament in light of the New.
That'll be Saturday. Yes.
That'd be Saturday. 2 sessions. That's an important one. So those who are around, please, if you want to visit with Jacob, get a good class, get a good class education, Jacob, you can save a lot of people money. I mean, we're talking about recession and we're talking about inflation. People want to go to Bible college. I think they should just come on Saturday. They save $3,000 on tuition. They can just take that class.
Yeah. Well, we can't teach you Greek and Hebrew. That's the only thing.
That's the only thing. That would be maybe next time. And on the 18th, on Sunday, you're going to be at Devore doing the Sunday service. So Saturday, Sunday, come ready to study with Jacob Prash. Saturday the 17th, Sunday the 18th, and then you're heading to Ohio. You're heading to Ohio at FBC, and then at that point, I think that's your last stop, and then you're heading home, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I've got some other things to do. We're not speaking engagements, and we'll be back, and then you and I will be in Israel, won't we?
Well, that's the plan.
Yeah,
that's the plan. And as long as they let us in, maybe we can conversation with some of our friends there, and maybe even invite Lapid. Maybe he can come have a talk. We'll straighten it out. But Jacob, we got some podcast things coming up, and that is we have our schedule that's come up. So if those who are watching, you can see the schedule on Friday. The Dilemma of Laodicea. I'm sorry, wrong one. I went the other way. Here we go. So it will be on September 3rd. Tomorrow is Bible study with Jacob Prash. It's a weekend Bible study with Jacob Prash. 1 Corinthians 15 on the resurrection. Then on Sunday, it's yours truly will be on Ephesians 2, Alive in Christ. Monday, this episode will air. And then Wednesday, it's Apologetics with Sandy Simpson. Then you got your midweek with Romans. And then Friday of basically a week from now, the dilemma of Laodicea with Jacob Prash. So catch up with those on podcasts, and you can find the podcast schedule on the YouTube page. You can find the podcast schedule on the website. So go to the website and go where Moriel is at online. Find Moriel, and you can find not only where Jacob's at speaking on video platforms like RTN and other ones, Rumble, but you could also find the podcast there as well. So we want to welcome those who are watching live. Thank you for being with us, not only on Rumble, YouTube, RTN, et cetera. I think those are the only ones. I shouldn't say et cetera, but I think those are the only ones. I think Tim's nodding his head like, yes, those are it. 3 of them. So welcome, and such a blessing to be with Jacob, such a blessing to be with you. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Davey. Thank you, Jonah. We're ready to start, Jacob. You ready to go?
Ready to go. Let's go.
Let's catch up. Jacob, I watched this. I read this article, and it was really fascinating. It's on the Jerusalem Post. It's by a gentleman named Sherwin Pomerantz. He's a Jewish businessman who writes, he's talking about why so many bad things happen to America. And his article is called, "Is God Punishing the United States of America?" He goes through a litany of things, a series of things, not only from weather patterns, just natural disasters, but he does point out, and he begins with the political upheaval in the United States. So let's start with that, and let's start with the speech by our political leader here, Joe Biden. They call him Brandon. He spoke in Philadelphia. It was a very dark, this is dark Brandon. People were shouting, let's go Brandon, and some kind of offensive things against him during the speech. But it was very dark, just the way the optics were terrible. His anger, his dark divisiveness. I mean, it was pretty bad, in my opinion. I mean, I'm usually not trying to be too critical of Joe, just based on all the things he said and done, but in his senility, seemingly. But he's ready to declare war on those who disagree with him. Jacob, real quick, your initial thoughts on Joe's speech from Philadelphia?
Well, again, he's a geriocrat, and he sounds like, and he looks like, and I'm not trying to circumvent or evade addressing the substance of what he said. The way that Joe Biden came across was like an embittered, half senile mumbler. That's how somebody would see him, as an embittered mumbler with incipient dementia or something. That's the way he came off. Remember, as we've said repeatedly, he's only a front man. He's only a stooge. Barack Obama is running the administration via Susan Rice and Klain. Oh, Biden doesn't mean anything. He was put there by the Democratic Party establishment to stop Democratic Party's version of populism, which was Bernie Sanders. That's the only reason he's there. He doesn't mean anything. He's simply a spokesman for the people who really run the country. Nobody takes him seriously, not even his own staff. Just look at him. Just look at him. He read a scripted speech, and he's just a mumbling old, an embittered, mumbling man who's going senile. He reminds me of King Lear in the Shakespeare play. King Lear, an old man losing his mind. He's very much a King Lear type figure, if you like Shakespeare. That's what he's.
Yeah. Some people said he there was echoes of just his anger, the echoes of Hitler, echoes of communist leaders who have gone out and just basically turned against people that disagreed with him. And he certainly did against people that he called the MAGA crowd.
Absolutely. Well, that was the way Hitler spoke against his political opponents. Mm-hmm. But of course, the rhetoric was just hyperbolic lies. But there's enough stupid people to believe it.
Jacob, I wanted to play a real quick video for our, not only for you, but for our folks here. I want to share my screen real quick. This is part of his speech, and I want you to comment on it because I think it's important for people to know just what he said. And I'm going to play the video, and I'm going to play it again and stop it at certain points and have you comment on what he said, because I think it's pretty telling of what he's thinking and where this nation is going.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. They promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country. They look at the mob that stormed the United States Capitol on January 6th, brutally attacking law enforcement, not as insurrectionists who placed a dagger at the throat of our democracy, but they look at it as patriots. And they see their MAGA failure to stop a peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election as preparation for the 2022 and 2024 elections. They tried everything last time to nullify the votes of 81 million people. This time, they're determined to succeed in thwarting the will of the people. That's why respected conservatives like Federal Circuit Court Judge Michael Ludwig has called Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans, quote, a clear and present danger to our democracy.
All right. Well, Jake, I'm going to play it again, and I'm going to stop it at certain points, and I'm going to ask you these things because you certainly said a mouthful there. Let's play it again, and I'll stop it in the middle.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose.
He says, the MAGA forces are going to take us back to a time where there's no right to choose. What does that mean, Jacob, in your mind? No right to choose? I mean, do we have a right to choose anymore?
Well, first of all, the Supreme Court decision that he's indirectly referring to said precisely that the voters should have a right to choose on the issue of abortion, not unelected judges. It simply gave the right to choose back to the voters state by state. So he's not telling the truth. But then I would, of course, raise the situation where, say, you have a baby who they want to be able to abort now at full term. At full term, that baby could have been born prematurely 1, 2, 3 weeks earlier and been a normal baby, but they're claiming the right to kill it. Well, is that a right to choose? A right to kill a human being who could be alive if you took it out of its mother's womb. It could be alive without even an incubator at that point of gestation. Or the situation I always point to, say you have a baby at 30, 32 weeks gestation, premature, in an incubator, in a hospital, and they're aborting one of the same fetal age, one elevator ride up. Is that a right to choose? You are choosing who lives and who dies, not based on any medical, scientific, or moral criteria, just on what you see as your choice. There may be unwanted pregnancies, but there are no unwanted babies. The baby can survive as a human being. It has human rights. You are dehumanizing a human being, the same as the Dred Scott decision, dehumanize blacks. It is the same precise thing. You're saying someone who's a human being is less than human and calling that the right to choose.
Let's go to the next one.
And now, America must choose to move forward or to move backwards, to build a future or obsess about the past.
Oh, hold on. Sorry. It went to a different one.
America.
There it is.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy.
Let's talk about the no right to privacy. What does he mean, and is it even real?
Exactly. What is he talking about? What exactly is he talking about? He wants to send out 87,000 new armed IRS agents, a federal agency that should be abolished and replaced by a flat tax. And he wants to send these people out to invade working American families and spy on every aspect of their business, their purchases, their finances, their everything. I know how he is making a war against privacy, but how are the so-called mega people doing that?
That's right. That's right. Let's go to the next one.
No right to contraception. No right to.
No right to contraception.
Where have mega people or pro-life people ever tried to outlaw contraception? He's just lying.
Oh,
what pro-life people often say is, in an age where we have so much contraception available, different forms, why are you using abortion, an invasive procedure, as a form of birth control when you have contraception? On the contrary, pro-life people often highlight the benefits of contraception and preventing unwanted pregnancies. Therefore, once again, he's lying. He is directly lying. He's a Hitler, he's a Stalin, he's a Ceausescu, he's a liar.
Let's go to the next one.
Marry who you love.
I want to back it up a little bit here.
who you love.
Oh, not that one.
No right to contraception. No right to marry who you love.
No right to marry whom you love. It's a mouthful there.
You know, if you want to have a same-sex marriage, okay, it is the same principle. State by state, by public referendum, as they did with Proposition 8 in California, the voters should have a right to choose whether to allow civil unions or not in that particular state. Only in the fascist judiciary of the Democratic Party and of establishment Republicans, a judge outlawed the democratic will of the people. What he's talking about is supplanting democracy by judicial fascism. That's exactly what he's talking about, imposing same-sex marriage instead of letting the public decide by referendum.
Very true. No right to marry who you love. So, you know, I guess you can marry an 8-year-old, is that according to Joe?
Does that include pedophilia? Does that include bestiality? It will do that. There are people who want that.
Very interesting. No doubt this was full of a lot of acrimony, a lot of hatred, a lot of divisiveness, and
a lot of dishonesty. Lot of dishonesty.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stop sharing here real quick. Go back to this. All right, we're back. A lot of dishonesty, a lot of hatred, a lot of divisiveness. Some people felt he didn't go far enough. This is McCabe. This is former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who came out and said, you know what? It didn't go far enough. You told us what the issue is, but you didn't say how you're going to deal with it. What is McCabe talking about, and what is he going to do? What does he want to do?
McCabe was justifiably fired by Trump. Unfortunately, McCabe was not indicted. He should have been, Strzok should have been, Page should have been, quite possibly Mueller should have been, and certainly Comey should have been. These people should have been indicted. They applied for a FISA warrant based on a forged dossier paid for by the Clinton administration, knowing what it was, and they applied for a FISA warrant to spy on a presidential candidate's campaign on that basis. Why is McCabe not indicted? Why is that man not under federal indictment? This is McCabe. Yes, Trump fired him. He should have been indicted.
What's his what's his issue against? I mean, I guess he wants to go after MAGA people. He wants to put them in jail. I mean, is that his
Well, certainly it's a political police force. You want the FBI as a political police force, which again should be replaced by another organization or another federal investigative agency that would not be involved in national security. Those counterintelligence and national security issues should be taken from the Justice Department and given to Homeland Security. The FBI in its presence needs to be abolished and replaced by a different organization, a different agency. It's had a history of corruption going back to the time of Hoover. It's time to get rid of it. It's been a long time to get rid of it, but that is another issue. This is just politically motivated rhetoric because it's getting close to the election time. What you're seeing here is the Democratic Party's version of campaigning by fear-mongering and mudslinging. Notice, Joe Biden is not talking about what you're paying at the pump.
No.
Not about inflation, not about rising energy and heating costs. He's not talking about the border crisis and people coming into the country. The fentanyl's pouring into the country like there's no tomorrow. He's not talking about any of the issues. He's just fear-mongering about the people who oppose him. That's all he's doing. He's circumventing the issues. The Democratic, and I'm not a Republican, but the Democratic Party cannot address the issues because they failed on every one of them. If you don't believe me, go down to the petrol station and try to fill your tank, or go buy groceries for your family. They know they failed on these issues. He says that we need to forget the past. Yeah, because it's been a year since the fiasco in Afghanistan.
Oh,
Trillions of dollars down the drain for nothing, and the Taliban are in control of it. 13 Americans left for dead for something that 2,500 or 3,500 troops at Bagram could have stopped from happening.
yep. Just a small amount.
This is a madman, except that he's too. If he had a brain, he would be a madman. But he has a senile mind. It's Obama doing this by Susan Rice.
Yeah.
Biden doesn't have the intellectual wherewithal or cognizance to do anything except read a scripted speech.
Yeah. If I only had a brain, said the Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
If I only had a brain. Jacob, this is kind of an interesting thing. We talked about it in a pre-meeting. Is both Judge Napolitano and Newt Gingrich have both come out and they put their statement online, and they let everybody know they've been on national television. Trump is going to be indicted. It's just a matter of time. It's imminent for three charges. Basically, it would include mishandling of defense secrets, obstruction, among other things. This is Napolitano. This is Gingrich. It's going to come down. He says Major Garland to AG Garland to indict Trump, going after Trump anytime now, maybe even before September's over. This certainly will foment the flames of what we already have, a civil war. It's not being fired upon or anything like that, but these certainly would foment those who support Trump.
Again, because they're in political trouble, because they've made a mess of everything, especially the economy. They need to find another way to try to win the election. So they politicize the judiciary, and they politicize law enforcement and the Justice Department. Hillary Clinton was not arrested or indicted. Hunter Biden was not arrested or indicted. It's very selective. The KGB, also known as the FBI, but I call it the KGB, will only go after their political enemies. They will not enforce the law objectively. If they did, among other people, Garland would have to be investigated. So, therefore, we see what's really, really happening. It is just a political misuse of the Justice Department and the judiciary before an election by a corrupt administration and a corrupt political establishment. And it is not only Democrats, it is establishment Republicans who are no better and no different. Remember, the Sadducees and Pharisees hated each other, but they would stick together against Jesus.
That's right. Now, Biden said he could, it's not all Republicans. He says, I work with some.
I'm not comparing Trump to Jesus. I'm just applying the principle.
Yeah.
McConnell and Schumer may not like each other, but they'll stick together against the patriot.
Yeah. Biden says that he doesn't paint all Republicans like that, because there's some that he worked with, called them establishment Republicans. He says they're not extremists.
No, the Democrats will sit on the opposite side of the aisle. They're Cheney. They're people like that.
Jacob, did you know this fact? This is interesting. On January 2023, there won't be any McCains or Cheneys or Bushes in any public office for the first time, and I think it's like 60 years.
Or Clintons.
That's right, or Clinton. So the first time, I guess there's progress there. You would imagine this is bipartisan, both sides.
Yeah. Well, that's good. The problem is they've all have sycophants ready to step into their shoes.
Jacob, back to the article. It's God Judging America. He goes on to explain that there's problems. There's natural disaster problems. There's water problems, like the one in Jackson, Mississippi this week. There's drought. And I guess the bottom line to the question is, could all these be possibly happening at the same time for a reason? That's the author's point, is God judging America with all these things at the same time?
Here's why I disagree with the article in the Jerusalem Post. The water shortage in the Rhine Valley in Europe, which is absolutely vital to the economy of Europe, to agriculture, to navigation, transport, to hydroelectric energy generation, is worse than what you see in the United States.
Wow.
Europe is in worse trouble.
Hmm.
Secondly, if you look at what's happening in places like Pakistan, I believe Pakistan is under God's judgment due to its persecution of Christians.
Hmm.
If you look at what's happening in China, he's focusing on the USA.
Right.
I don't say the USA is an exception, but it's certainly not the focus. God's judgment is being poured out on many nations.
Mm-hmm.
Many nations, America being one of them.
Yeah.
But by no means the only one. Why is he highlighting the United States or singling out the United States? The European bond market is flat. The bond market in Europe is flat. There's no security in buying in corporate debt. There's no security in government debt. The bond market is flat. If you look at the droughts and if you look at the impact of the energy crisis in Europe concerning Russian oil, natural gas, etc., the failure of renewables in Germany, if you look at the energy crisis and the massively rising prices, Britain had a 53% increase in heating and electricity costs several months ago, 53%. Now, by October, they're saying it can go up another 80% on top of the 53%. Okay, these things are happening in America, but they're happening in Britain, they're happening in Europe, they're happening in Asia, they're happening in China. They're happening certainly in Africa and the third world and in much of Latin America. He's highlighting America for some reason. When I see somebody singling out one country, I don't pay attention to them, especially when they try to make it or frame it as some kind of a biblical or apocalyptic or religious perspective of what's happening. You want to see God's judgment. Look what's happening to Pakistan.
Yeah. And perhaps this is a case where he's writing what he's saying, but he's wrong in what he's denying.
That's correct.
Correct. Yeah. Jacob, let's talk about Europe for a moment. You brought it up. Household income in Europe, well, all over the world, but especially in Europe, dropping. I mean, it's year to year dropping. It's the idea of having any disposable income. It's not even a thing anymore. World inflation through the roof. Estonia, Latvia, Spain, Portugal, not to mention UK, France, darker, colder Europe this time around. Unprecedented power failures this winter. Poland, France. Let's talk about Poland for a minute because we have a lot of believers in Poland, very godly people that we hold dear to us. Poland's got a lot of issues, including a coal issue. People standing in line for miles just trying to get coal for the winter. It's still summer. I mean, it's still very hot here, at least in the U.S., hot in Europe, but we're going to get to winter pretty quick. Beyond imagination, says homeowners. They have to line up for days to get coal. What's going on in Poland?
Unfortunately, a lot of the coal in Eastern Europe is high sulfur. It is not low sulfur. The American anthracite bituminous, you can get low sulfuric coal in the United States, and you can get it other places. But these people are talking about burning a low grade of coal that has a lot of sulfur, even brown coal in some places, which is poison, which is polluting. It's a horrible pollutant. Now, coal can be burned, the kind of coal you get from West Virginia and so forth. That kind of coal can be burned relatively clean. It can be burned relatively clean, but that is not the kind of coal they're talking about. Why is Europe going back to coal? And it's not just Poland. Germany stupidly bought into the green agenda the corrupt green agenda, and the idiotic green agenda, that you can go to 100% renewables. They tried that and it failed. Carbon house emissions increased based on those failed policies. And now you have the issue of Russia not providing oil and natural gas and embargoes. Donald Trump warned about this. If Europe had had any sense, they would have built large liquid gas regasification plants along the Baltic and along the English Channel and along the North Sea. They would have had a way out of this had they acted several years ago. They're not going to have an easy way out of it now. The United States isn't going to have it particularly good, but Europe's going to have it worse.
Yeah. Countless of consumers facing financial hardships. Basically, their energy bills is soaring to the stratosphere. I'll give you some examples, Jacob. Here we go. Millions of households see their energy bills rocket as price cap is hiked to £3,500 a year, plunging many into financial hardships. Many cafes, here's one example in Leicester, the electricity bill jumped from $12,000 a year, just $12,000 a year, put it in dollars, to $64,000 a year. This is their energy bill. What options do they have? 3/4 of the pubs are facing closure because of the energy bills are catastrophic and soaring 80%. There's a movement of not paying your bill by October 1st, not paying your bill because of the rate hike. Small businesses in Ireland walloped by catastrophic energy bills, 10,000 euros hike. This is bad, really, really bad. The Bank of England just announced, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that they're going to considering yield curve control on top of the energy crisis. Winter of Discontent Part 2, we talked about that, I think last week. But many people are fearing that there's going to be riots in England.
England and the continent.
Yeah.
Well, we may first of all thank Joe Obama. These are the energy policies of Barack Obama being exercised by the Biden administration. Had the United States been allowed to continue to develop its natural gas industry, and had fracking continued under regulation, but had it continued, this would not be happening anything like to the degree. Secondly, the corruption and bureaucratic, basically it's a bureaucratic stranglehold that the European bureaucracy in Brussels from the EU has on the European economy as a whole. The incompetence and the inefficiency of Europe of the EU has been another major factor. Now, they can conveniently blame all of this on Russia. They can, but they were warned years ago, do not trust Russia as a source. It's something Europe has brought on itself, and it is something for which we can place the blame at the feet of Joe Obama. Biden.
Italy, France, Belgium, especially Italy and Belgium, with their farmers being completely destroyed. In Belgium, they're protesting. Italy, they're standing in line for food. We know the Netherlands. We even had a Gert come over and speak to us about it. You spoke about Germany. The EU has a plan, I guess. They have to structure, reform the electricity. We heard from Ursula, the president of the EU, saying, well, basically not saying anything. We don't know anything about what's going on, and we don't have plan to fix it.
At least for once, that woman has told the truth. She doesn't know what's going on and doesn't know what to do about it. That was the only. Those are the only words I ever heard come out of that woman's mouth that were honest. And finally, she told the truth. She doesn't know what to do about it. They don't know. Well, what you're going to see is the following. You're going to see a combination of the following practices. You're going to see price controls, which will have adverse ramifications.
Oh, man.
Price controls. You're going to have government subsidies, which will only increase inflation and taxation. That's what you're going to have. And it is quite likely that you will eventually see rationing. You're going to see rationing. There will also be a push by some people to make peace with Russia and give Putin what he wants, which is Putin's game. Putin is in trouble. He needs to do something in the Ukraine. He has to force Europe to negotiate with him over the Ukraine. And although it is hurting Russia, he has no choice but to hurt Russia even further in order to hurt Europe. He's desperate. He's desperate.
Yeah, he's going to hurt his own people for the.
Yeah, there's no way he can displace or replace what he was selling to Europe to China, because too much of the oil and natural gas comes from the Arctic. It takes too long to ship it. It's not liquid gas. There are no pipelines. They just don't have the technology. And Russia has another problem. Western companies have boycotted and bailed out. Okay, American and like the big European company is Shell, Royal Shell. Shell is owned by Britain and Holland jointly. Okay?
Dutch,
Dutch company. Okay, when those companies leave, now it's down to Russian petroleum production engineers. But those guys are leaving. There's a brain drain. 500,000 people have left Russia since the Ukraine invasion. And most of them are educated middle and upper middle class professional and business people. He is having a brain drain of Russians who won't be able to do it. And without Western technology and capital investment of Western oil companies, he's not going to be able to do it. He can't develop it enough to sell to China on any grand scale, not enough to replace what's happened with the loss of the trade with Europe. So he's willing to hurt Europe, willing to hurt Russia in order to hurt Europe, because he has to try to negotiate some kind of a face-saving solution to the mess he's got himself in the Ukraine. It's an imbroglio.
Going back to this energy crisis, Jacob, I mean, the idea that we're in an energy crisis has to do with this climate change, bizarro world that they live in, that there's no technology that can replace fossil fuel dependency on oil and things like that. So this is really inconvenient truth that nobody wants to talk about, but we'll talk about it here. The Arctic Sea. The Arctic Sea has grown in the last 10 years. So polar bears are thriving. The Great Coral Reef, the Great Barrier Reef, there's more coral now than ever before. It's hard for people to sell this idea of climate change destroying the planet now, but especially the Arctic Sea, it's growing. And some prospects, some experts believe that going through that area may become too icy.
Yes. Well, the belief that Canada was going to have a windfall because of the Northwest Passage due to global warming, that the ice caps that the glaciers would melt, and instead of 6 weeks of navigational waters across the north of Canada from the Atlantic to the Bering Sea and then down to the Pacific through the Bering Straits, instead of 6 weeks of that, they were saying they would have months of it, and this would be a boom for global navigation to which Canada would benefit. But when you have climate change, that is the opposite of what people are being told. It's freezing. You see what's happening. You're getting more permafrost in the Arctic, more permafrost in the Arctic. There's always been climate change. Again, we keep going back. Why did the Vikings call Greenland when it was permafrost ice? And why do they call Iceland, which is mainly green, Iceland? Iceland is not permafrosted, most of it. Greenland is permafrosted, yet Greenland is called Greenland when it's not green, and Iceland is called Iceland when it's not ice. There's always been these changes. You can manage the effects of these changes but you cannot govern these changes. They're part of a normal meteorological cycle, the same as El Nino. I've been saying that for years. And it diverts away from the real issues of pollution, particulate emissions, or the industrial pollutants being churned out by China and India in unbelievable quantities that will affect the global atmosphere. It's a diversion away from oceanic pollution of the oceans and garbage dumping in the oceans. It's a diversion away from fighting pollution, from getting clean air and clean water. Additionally, scientific opinion is being suppressed. That which argues that CO2, which is to plants what oxygen is to humans, that CO2 increases vegetation and plant growth. You just look at a greenhouse. They call it a greenhouse gas. What does a greenhouse do? It uses CO2.
Yeah.
It concentrates CO2 to get hyperproduction.
Yeah. And I guess there's been such a, and we'll talk about it another episode, Jacob, all these companies that have bought into this idea of carbon capturing. It's a huge industry. And we're talking billions of dollars from Australia, the UK, the US, to companies just to capture carbon, which they don't really capture it. No. Even so, they try to send it back into the earth to get more oil, because they get this other oil, this other type of oil that's really hard to get by using carbon in there. So they're making hands over fist, and they're getting the oil out anyway. So this is a racket. I mean, it literally is a racket.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Now,
emergency. Most of it is a racket.
Yeah. Now, there's emergencies right now, Jacob, because of this climate change thing, because of the energy crisis, especially here in our state in California. You're not allowed to charge your electric vehicle after a certain time. So what about egg on their face? What about in Colorado, where you got a message on your thermostat saying governor's orders, you can't change the thermostat because we're in an energy crisis. This is the Xcel Energy customers who could not change the thermostat. So literally your equipment, your house is turning against people saying, we're in an energy crisis. You can't charge your car. You can't cool your house. You have to walk on, incredibly degrees, 115 degrees. You can't cool your food if your energy's out, and your refrigerator won't let you cool down your food. What a dystopian world this is. And we literally brought all this stuff in. It's called the Internet of Things into our home. And now they're backfiring.
Well, notice it is states with Democratic governments. You've got a man like Newsom telling people to buy a car that's going to cost at least $63,000 to save the environment. And now you can't charge it either. I mean, this is the stupidity. You're talking, look, I don't wish it. But if somebody in San Francisco who votes Democrat steps out of their house and falls into a puddle of urine left by a homeless person, and then they get raped and knifed, they have no reason to whinge. They got what they voted for. They got what they voted for. Don't whinge. If you're a Democrat in one of these blue states, and that's what you got what you voted for. What are you whinging about?
I guess this idea of carbon credits is coming into the forefront, where people will be given some credit. You have to buy them. It's already true in the business world. The economy runs on carbon credits, but many of these companies like Tesla buy carbon credits so they be able to pollute a certain amount into the environment, and then you could sell them. You can sell them on the market to companies that need them. But this is going to come to the individual. You're going to get a certain amount of carbon credits per month. If you go over it, too bad. Wait for next month.
Yeah, you can use your frequent flyer points for carbon credits with airlines. The entire thing is absurd. What they're actually doing is creating a fiat currency. They are creating a fiat currency with no intrinsic value.
The amount of poverty, Jacob, that this is causing, it's alarming. uh, obviously the cities, big cities, metropolitan areas like New York, like LA. There's crimes are on the rise, and we looked at pictures of people getting robbed in the middle of the day in Manhattan, women getting attacked by guys on bikes. A guy gets his Rolex stolen. Antifa in Roanoke, Texas, stands outside a drag queen show with kids involved, and they're standing outside with AR-15 saying, "You can't come in. You come to protest. These gangs are going to come after you." So you got violence on one side, you got political violence on the other side, protecting drag queen shows and pedophilia. What are the recourses?
I can see a situation happening. And it almost happened when they unjustly put that young guy on trial that time when he shot the rioters.
Oh, yeah, Rittenhouse, yeah.
Yeah, Rittenhouse, right. That was a harbinger of something I can see happening in places like Texas, where if these Antifa guys do what they do, other people, NRA people, will defend their constitutional rights and gun these animals down. And and if it's self-defense, they have a legal right and a moral obligation to do it. If you've got people performing illegal acts with underage children and they're under the protection of people armed with assault rifles, other people have a right to stop it if the police and government won't. That is what it's being pushed to, a civil war, a confrontation. Now, I don't want that. I do not want that to happen. I would rather see government taking the responsibility and closing down such things if it involves children. Mutually consenting adults, you can do what you want. Just don't force it on other people. But when you involve children, now we have an issue.
Jacob, the government's idea or the World Economic Forum's idea to deal with crime and violence, it's bizarre, but it is true. They want to put a chip in your brain. This is how surveillance gets started. They're going to confront crime by having a pre-crime division where law enforcement can check to see if you're thinking perhaps about committing a crime. Reoffenders will be watched very carefully. Now, this is the same World Economic Forum that says we want to put it on kids. Is chipping the way of the future, and what is that going to look like?
It's going to ultimately look like Revelation chapter 13. All of these things are setting the stage for the Antichrist and false prophet. That's what it's coming to.
The AI that the World Economic Forum is promoting, AI censorship. Recently, they just censored, these guys, WorldNet Daily, you know them pretty well. They just censor them. You can't find them under Google search engine. And if you do type their address, it gives you a warning that this is, be harmful to your computer. It's happening all over the place. AI controls the internet. Basically, if you don't agree with
look at the political way that AI is being used or misused, you can see it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how the false prophet is going to make the image of the Antichrist speak. Make an automaton or to make a virtual person. Personify it. Personify it with the character of the Antichrist and make it speak. You can see how he's going to do it.
There's that famous social media influencer, Michaela.
Yes,
she's out here from this way. She doesn't exist, but she has millions of followers. She's touted for her authenticity, which I thought it was funny. Her inclusivity. She's pro gay, pro abortion, all this stuff. But she's followed by millions of people. Thousands of kids just are called the Michaelians, which just have a fan club. But she doesn't even exist. That we know about. We know about her, but how other AI personalities are going to come on the scene, which we won't know who they are, that they are actually computer generated images, but it's just going to fool people left and right.
Yes, well, I've warned that virtual technology was going to come to this some time ago. An artificial reality. They will make an artificial reality that people will accept as the real one. And that is going to happen. I remember several years ago, maybe even more than 5 years ago, there was a Japanese pop star with music and a personality profile and a family, and she didn't exist. She was computer generated. The music was computer generated, but she sold a lot of recordings. I mean, all these things always begin innocuously, but then they become something serious.
Yeah. I did want to announce people that those who are watching live stream, they can send in your questions and we'll take them at the end. Just want to let everybody know, I forgot to mention it at the beginning. Send them in. Tim will filter them out, get them to us. Jacob, my concern with the AI stuff is what they're going to lead to. Image of the beast, and of course, a cashless society,
Yes.
which ultimately be Revelation 13. But we've seen this more and more. Cashless societies, and there are people that are not Christians who are warning, this is the last straw. It's going to take away freedom. We got a huge company like Starbucks saying we will no longer accept cash as of October 1st. So we're going programmable digital currency in the future. That's really the in the horizon, not in the future horizon necessarily in a long time from it, but in immediate horizon.
People should just no longer accept Star. Just don't buy their coffee anymore. It's not that good anyway, in my opinion. You can do better. I think people should just boycott. That company has supported one left-wing cause after another. I think people should just not patronize it.
The way of the future is what many people think will be not just cryptocurrency, but central bank digital currency, which is basically programmable money.
Yes.
That would allow you to spend it where they tell you to spend it. They can track you, surveillance, digital identity. One example would be Canada. Canada, the government shut down literally accounts of people that donated to the trucker protest. GoFundMe, deplatform. I mean, this is, if your views are right, you can use money. If your views are not right.
That's right. If you don't agree with us, we're going to use the power of government to suspend your ability to engage in commerce.
Yeah, I mean,
now that is a misuse of government for political purposes by a politician, but he was elected.
Yeah, people got it. Yeah, and my concern, of course, universal basic income is right around the corner, where you basically just will be given a stipend every year or every month to say what to use and can't use. And if you don't have the right views, you can't use it, and we won't send it to you.
That's right.
People are going.
China is a prototype of that. It's already beginning in China.
Well, let's talk about China. Social credit score, crazy lockdown. Beijing just wanted another lockdown just recently, as well as Shanghai and Dalian, which is a port city, 3 hours from Beijing, for no reason. They haven't explained it, but it is about the virus. But there's no reason, that there's no data saying why they're doing it.
Well, they can't tell people why they're doing it, but it is obvious to anybody who has been following their policies concerning COVID why they're doing it. It is no secret. First of all, that virus was invented in Wuhan, and Fauci misled us about American participation in that kind of research, and the reasons for doing it. Fauci's a horrible man. So you've got this problem. China needs to blame things on foreigners all the time or somebody else. The party can never take responsibility for its actions. So that's the basis. Why are they doing this? They have two big problems in China. I'm not pro-vax. But the Chinese vaccines manufactured in China were not as good as the ones in the West. And the ones in the West don't work very well. So the ones in the West don't work very well, but the ones in China almost don't work at all, to say nothing of potential side effects. They don't have a Pfizer. They don't have the same quality of pharmacological science that you have in the West. China basically copies things and makes them cheaper and steals. Okay, that is the first reason. The second reason is this: they engaged in social lockdowns. As did the government of Britain for a short time, much of Europe for a short time, and certain places in the United States, and certainly Canada, Australia. But China, they engaged in these lockdowns for a longer period of time with a larger population. China has no natural immunity. It does not have people who were infected and now have antibodies. There is no natural resistance or natural immunity in China, and the vaccines don't really work. They're worse than the ones in the West that don't really work. So you've got this compound problem. We have no pharmacological solution, and we have no natural immunity solution or homeopathic solution where the body would heal itself. No homeopathic solution, no pharmacological solution. None. They have to resort to these lockdowns. And the size of cities in China, I've been to Shanghai. I've been to Beijing. Now, again, I've been to probably most, not all, but most of the really big cities in the world. I've been to Mumbai, India, and New Delhi, India, and Mexico City, and certainly Tokyo and New York and London and things like that. But I've been to huge cities like Cairo and Bangkok. There's massive, massive cities. One of the few really big cities I haven't been to is Sao Paulo, Brazil. But okay, I haven't been there, but I've certainly been to Mexico City and the Tokyo and Bangkok. I've seen the size of these cities and how big they are. They are all dwarfed by China. You wouldn't believe there could be so many people in a city unless you've been to Shanghai. It's unbelievable. You would think, just walking on the Bund along the river opposite Pudong in Shanghai on an average night, you would think there was some major event like a sports stadium with 80,000 people just let out, just after the game, and they're all walking out of this. It was just a normal, the size of these cities is stupendous. I've been a lot of times to Chongqing, or Chongqing, as some people call it. 40 million people, 40 million. Greater New York has between 20 and 22 million, depending on where you draw the lines around the suburbs.
Yeah.
Chongqing is twice that, and Chongqing is not the biggest city in China. Beijing and Shanghai are bigger than Chongqing. You can't, unless you've been there, you can't describe it. And the numbers of people I've seen in Mumbai, India, and things like it's unbelievable. But in China, to lock that many people down, it's insane. But they have no choice. And the economic impact on Chinese production and supply chain issues that result from it, that has global ramifications. There you go. That's how it happened. That's how it happened. COVID backfired on them.
Yeah, China's in trouble. I mean, you got the Evergrande issue. You mentioned the railroad.
That's all that. I'm just talking about the COVID issue.
Yeah, it's compounding to the degree that is he gonna hold power? I mean, the people are not very happy with them. The demand of heaven is being questioned.
For the first time, there were some senior party members who dared to make statements critical of him this week. That is interesting. How far it'll go remains to be seen.
Yeah. And especially since he's really trying to get this Chairman Mao type type regime, emperor forever type stuff.
But don't forget, he's lost face over Taiwan.
Yeah.
He lost face. Asians don't like to lose face.
And that's the concern. It's like, I think they have to act. And I think, people look at it in 2-3 years. I might be thinking 1 or 2 years. Jacob, you mentioned these medicines that, obviously didn't work. Some of the vaccines didn't work. We have a generation that it's being tried with all these medicines that don't work. It's basically trial and error on the people. So like guinea pigs. And there's been a lot of pediatrics, a lot of psychiatric doctors that are coming out, psychiatrists saying, look, we're experimenting on kids, stuff that we don't even know if it works. They're trying everything on these kids medically, like guinea pigs, psychiatric drugs, multiple drugs at once, SSRIs that is causing major problems. Pediatrics are warning that these trans medicines, these medicines for trans kids, are destroying kids, hormone blockers and things like that. There's been concern for parents that are going, look, I didn't think my transitioning my kids was going to be that I'm going to lose my kid. They thought they're doing some good thing. I don't agree with it, but it's worse than what they're saying. Hospitals are performing. They're butchering kids, experimenting on kids. There's no end to this. You got this 31-year-old transgender football player who's happy to shower with girls now because he's convinced he's a male. So it's a mess. But let's talk about the medicine thing. This is a big issue. Gene therapy and all these other medicines that have come out, plus hormone blockers. It's destroying a whole generation. A whole generation.
There have been instances of this in the past on a much smaller scale. They were giving hormone modifying medication routinely to women in Great Britain in the 1950s who were having children being born with no arms. And there was a national proliferation of it as a result of this, telling women, take it, take it, take it. Wow. The same kind of thing they would later do with COVID. Just take it, trust us, okay? These things have happened before on a smaller scale. Then you have something else. Attention deficit disorder, things like this. Computer games engender short attention spans. Kids are less likely to read books, watch long films or videos that are instructive or lectures. Short attention span. Boom, 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 boom. Now, a baby has a short attention span. A little baby has a short attention span. But as a baby grows, the attention span increases. Okay? What they are doing is keeping people babies. They're keeping people with the minds of babies with short attention spans. So you have a kid in school and a teacher says, this kid does not seem to be learning well and has a hard time paying attention. He must have attention deficit disorder. Go to the school nurse. The school nurse writes a note to the kid's parents, maybe, and they refer the kid to a pediatrician recommended by the school board. He prescribes Ritalin, or she prescribes Ritalin. Now, traditionally, in medical education, they taught medical students and they taught student doctors the best way to diagnose a disease is with some defined pathology or a blood chemistry or a biopsy or a scan, tomography, something. The worst way to diagnose a disease is to, by educated guesswork, prescribe a medication. And if they seem to respond to it, that becomes the diagnosis. So if they seem to respond to Ritalin, they had ADD. You understand what I'm saying? Nobody addresses the issue. Maybe the kid is spending too long on computer games and not enough time reading a book or watching a serious video that for an hour and a half about a science lecture or something like this.
Right.
Okay. And these skills of just killing people and shooting whoever they do with these games, I mean, it just becomes absurd. So they look for a chemical solution to a behavioral problem. Additionally, it is found with the divorce rate, children from broken homes are predisposed to do less well in school. You don't look at the sociological factors. You don't look at the environmental factors. You just look for a pharmacological remedy to something, take a pill and it's solved.
Yeah.
That is what has happened. And they've turned children into guinea pigs.
Yeah.
On a wild scale.
Yeah.
This is what's happened.
This experiment, now some tout this, Jacob, as a great thing. And you and I watched about what Jared Kushner said about immortality. So he comes out, he's a transhumanist. That's really who he is. He's a transhumanist. He wants immortality. And he says he's going to achieve it in this generation through vaccine and gene therapy. And the science behind it, it's hopefully he's going to advance to the point where we're the last generation that's going to die. Now, he was in charge of Operation Warp Speed to get the vaccines out and stuff like that with the Trump administration, him being his son-in-law. What's your take on this? And this is the bizarre world from a guy who was very close to the president of the United States. Immortality? Transhumanism?
I've always warned, I voted for Donald Trump twice. And I almost always agreed with him, but not all the time. One of the things I disagreed with was Kushner, Jared Kushner. Not because his office was at 666 Fifth Avenue, they owned that building. No. But the Abraham Accords.
Yes.
There'll be a false peace in the Middle East by Antichrist. Now he's talking about transhumanism, eternal life through a way other than faith in the Jewish Messiah that he doesn't believe in as a Jew. At least not yet. Okay. I don't like Mr. Kushner. I understand Mr. Trump was surrounded by terrible people. The media was trying to get him. They still are. They lie. And he needed people close to him that he could trust, so he got family. I understand his dilemma. But I was never comfortable with Mr. Kushner. I'm not against him, but I don't like his ideas, and I didn't like his involvement and the amount of influence and power he had in the Trump administration. I just did not. He is somebody who as a Jew, I hope he gets saved and comes to faith in Yeshua, but his ideas are not governed by any kind of a scriptural worldview in any sense of the word. He's very much from the same kind of thinking as Yoel Hariri is the Schwab. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. God is not a factor in the equation, at least not the God of his fathers, which is another characteristic of Antichrist. He'll have no regard for the God of his fathers, it says in Daniel. Now, I'm not saying Jared Kushner is the Antichrist, but I'm saying he's an indication of that spirit going that way. As much as I like Donald Trump in many other areas, there were areas I was very uncomfortable with and disagreed with, including the nepotism.
Very true. Jacob, you spoke about Antichrist. Let's talk about an Antichrist. Here's the Pope. Instructs all Vatican entities to move funds to the Vatican Bank. Very convenient, before September 30th. So let's talk about what he did, and then let's talk about why do you think he's doing it. It's called Predicate Evangelium, which is basically Roman Curia. I don't know what it has to do with the gospel, but it's everything. Institute of Works of Religion is going to control pretty much everything. Basically, the Vatican Bank is a financial institution, and everything according to Article 1, Paragraph 1 and 2 of Article 219, everything has to be moved, liquid assets and movable assets, to be entrusted under the Holy See. Jacob, you've been critical of the Vatican. You pointed to Roman Catholicism, false religious system. You pointed to this false pope, this is Antichrist pope. But this is what he's doing. Tell us a little more about that, but also why he's doing it.
If you go to Italy, you'll see what the Vatican really is. You'll see commercial signs on the streets. Banco Spiritu Santo, the Bank of the Holy Spirit, or the Catholic Bank of Venuto. The ugliest and most violent banking scandal in European history, in modern European history at least, was the Ambrosiano bank scandal. 200 people were murdered, over 200. The Vatican paid hundreds of millions of dollars to buy itself out of it. When the American Bishop Paul Marcinkus was the president of the Vatican Bank, and the Pope gave him refuge from investigating law enforcement authorities inside the Vatican. The Vatican Bank has a history of corruption. It's been involved in money laundering. It's been involved in a lot of things. But they call it the Ministry of Religious Works. That tells you exactly what the Roman Catholic Church is. It's a business. It's a business. Now, the Vatican is not a bank as we think as a commercial bank. It's not even a per se investment bank. It's not a central bank that issues its own currency. But it is something that can use religion to operate autonomously outside of the control of any government, outside of the control of the Bank for International Settlements, outside of the control of any central bank, outside of the control of the National Monetary Fund. It can operate completely independently as an independent financial system in its own right. And it's right in Europe.
Yeah.
And it can use religion to induce people to become its clients. And the Pope, with the stroke of a pen, issues a papal edict telling all Roman Catholic orders and dioceses, put your money with us. And they have to do what the Pope said because they believe he's the vicar of Christ in the era of Peter. Well, the Pope said it's holy. This is all predicated on the gospel. It's the ministry. This is religious work. We have to give them money to. It's laughable.
Yeah.
The history of corruption of Vatican banks, of course, go back to the Middle Ages. It goes back to the rival banking families of Europe who hated each other, like the Medici family and the Borgia family, and the Borgia popes and Medici popes. It was all corrupt. The history of Vatican or papal, let's call it papal, corruption in banking goes back centuries. They've been at it a long time. They've been shafting people much longer than the Federal Reserve or the Bundesbank or the European Central Bank. Nobody had even thought of Goldman Sachs. Or long before any J.P. Morgan or the Mellon family or Brown Brothers Harriman, long before any of that, you had a papal banking institution. It is centuries old. It is not doing anything new, but it is doing it on a larger scale at a crucial time. There must be some kind of major change coming.
Yeah.
Global currency markets that the Pope is aware of, that he does not want Roman Catholic assets, cash assets, to be subject to any kind of regulation or bail-ins. Bail-ins have already happened in Cyprus and basically in Iceland.
Yeah.
Bail-ins have happened before. Don't think they cannot happen again. China is in big trouble. China has to go to a bail-in pretty soon. It may have already begun to do it, actually. Does the Pope know that bail-ins are coming? Not bailouts, bail-ins. And he doesn't want to lose his cash. That is a very fair question. People need to notice it and take it into account in understanding their own finances.
Yeah, that's right. I do believe something's coming, and I do believe the Pope is getting ready for that. What that may be, I don't know. When that will be, I don't know. But it is interesting. They have until September 30th to get everything settled. And of course, the Great Reset's not out of the question with all the trouble in China, trouble in the UK, America. Jacob, but we can't underestimate the trouble of war. And let's finish this episode with this wars and rumors of wars. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, basically defenses activated, death tolls on the rise. It's a night of chaos. Protesters outside the embassy, they had to evacuate it. These are gangs sponsored by Iran. Is Iran controlling Iraq? Is that what I'm getting out of this? I mean, it's terrible that it's happening, but look at the picture.
The population in and around Baghdad was about 20% of the Iraqi population, and it was predominantly Sunni. South of Baghdad, going down to Basra and to the Sha'at al-Arab, that area from the Persian Gulf up to the southern outskirts of Baghdad, okay, that is Shia.
Okay.
The Shia are in the pocket of the Iranians.
The
north are the people who were betrayed repeatedly by the United States, the Kurds. Kurds were the only people we could have ever trusted, but they were stabbed in the back, certainly by Bush. They were stabbed in the back by Obama. The one friend we could have had, America stabbed in the back.
Wow.
That was the Kurds. Something should have been done, but it wasn't. And of course, the Turks hate the Kurds. Another situation. Therefore, we have to take into account that Iraq is not a country, it is three countries. It is a Kurdish country, it is a Sunni Arab country, and it is a Shia Arab country, but Shia Islam is controlled by Persian Shia imams.
Oh, man.
Indirectly. So it's the same in Lebanon. Hezbollah is controlled the same way. So that is the situation you're dealing with.
Yeah.
It was a mess from the word go. This did not have to happen this way.
And nothing's been done to rectify. I mean, we're still dealing with the same issues in Afghanistan, same issues in Baghdad now, same issues in Yemen. Yeah. It's just going to keep going, and it's going to be a disaster, not only economically for the people there, a war, but more of the tentacles of Iran are being displayed.
Yes.
And yet Biden is ready to give them the opportunity to sell their oil to the world. This is what it just came out.
No, but it's Obama. Obama has always been pro-Iranian.
Yes.
And Valerie Jarrett, they've always been pro-Iranian. And when you're pro-Iranian, you're pro-Iranian terror. I do not know how to understand the policies of the Biden administration and the Obama administration other than something that is bordering on treason, if not treason.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Biden, a part of the deal, part of the 2015, going back to the 2015 deal that Obama gave him, is to allow Iran to sell its oil in the global markets. They can't sell it right now, but they're going to do it now.
To fund terror.
Yeah. Biden's thing is, well, have you seen the price of oil? We need oil, so we're going to go to Iran and give them the deal so they can sell it.
Biden's or Joe Obama. The Joe Obama energy policy is this: Instead of giving the money to Dakota and Texas and Oklahoma, give the money to Venezuela, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Putin. How dare we give the money to the American economy when we have enemies who want it? That is Obama. That's Biden. And that is how stupid the people who vote for them are.
Yeah, it's an inverted reality, an inverted world. Jacob, let's finish with the Chinese and Taiwan Strait. What's going on there? Drones have come into the Taiwanese airspace. They have shut them down. They have shot at them. They have promised strong countermeasures. We know China. We've talked about China earlier. They're wounded. They got a lot of issues economically. They got issues politically. Is this a way of save face, I guess you could call it, at the same time obtaining some of these the economy of Taiwan with the chips?
As we've always stated, the basic strategy that China has always used, and it was certainly used by Mao at the end of the Cultural Revolution to reconsolidate power, was or is to artificially solidify a sense of Chinese nationalism by amplifying a foreign threat or some kind of offshore military enemy. They will use the threat of war in order to cement a unified nationalism when the government is in trouble politically, socially, or economically. That is the basic Chinese strategy. That is what they're doing. Everything else is derivative from that.
Of course, it's going to be a real trouble. It's going to be a real trouble if these wars begin to happen. We've got boiling points in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Taiwan, China, Ukraine, Russia. You got a lot of boiling points, plus a terrible economy that it's worldwide. I really don't see a way out of this except what they've been planning. It's a reset. It's a great reset.
Remember what Jesus said: wars and rumors of wars.
That's right.
Wars and rumors of wars. And we know what's coming to Revelation 13. When you see the abomination, that's it. The rapture will follow the setting up of the abomination of desolations very rapidly. It'll be shortly after the first half of the tribulation, between the sixth and seventh seal. That Amen. Is what is going to happen. All of this stuff, AI, talking automatons, virtual personifications of people, all of this technology is going in that direction. It's all marching to Revelation 13. I'm not an alarmist or a conspiracy theorist. It is real, and it's what is happening. And we need to prepare for the return of Jesus. Come quickly, Lord Jesus.
Amen. Maranatha. Jacob, before we take questions, how do you see Israel playing a role in all this? I mean, it just seems to be the nation that's in the middle of all this, with enemies all around it, betrayers all around it, and yet there's a promise for the people of Israel that God's going to stand with them. God's going to bring salvation to those who trust in Yeshua and Jesus. But how do you see Israel playing out its role in these days?
Ultimately, Israel will make a covenant with death. It'll enter into a treaty with the Antichrist and will betray itself, will sign its death warrant. It will only be the return of Yeshua that saves their existence. They will make a covenant with death. The rabbis will sign on the dotted line. We want the Mashiach now. They don't want the real Mashiach. They've rejected him. They want another one, and they're going to get him. That's what's happening.
Now, Israel's had a history of this idea of Messiah's coming. I mean, you've had the Orthodox with the Menachem Schneerson and all these other.
It goes back to Jacob Frank. It goes back to Bar Kokhba. It goes back to Shabbat Tzvi. There's always been this, but the ultimate one is coming.
Yeah,
they already be alive.
Yeah, and there's such a move toward the temple. Is the average Israeli, the say secular Israeli, do they look at the temple as something they must have in order to fulfill themselves as a people? maybe not a religious person, but someone that can see it as, well, this is us, this is our heritage, this is our people.
Some of the religious, yes, but the religious are a growing minority within Israel because they have large families. Israel has a huge abortion rate, an astronomically high abortion rate.
Wow.
But it's the Orthodox who breed like rabbits. Also, you have the Sephardic, moderately religious Sephardic people tend to be quite nationalistic. They, of course, would support anything like this. I think the abortion rate in Israel is going to be in large part Israel's demise, and it will tip the kind of political power demographically into the hands of the religious and ultra-Orthodox who will make a deal with the Antichrist. That is what I think.
No, they're very interesting.
Israel, look, no nation that murders its own children doesn't suffer ramifications. We saw what happened to Israel in the days of King Manasseh.
Yeah.
It's going to happen again. They've killed more Jewish children than Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
Abortion in Israel is unbelievable, unbelievably high. There is definitely going to be a ramification of it. One of the ramifications is the Orthodox will outbreed them.
And of course, their role in the Knesset would actually tip the scales to, yeah. Jacob, do you see another appearance of Bibi on the political scene in Israel?
The political panorama of Israel, Israeli politics and the Knesset, always comes back to one thing. It is unpredictable.
Very true. Very true.
You have the most unworkable form of democracy in the world. Other countries have it, and it creates similar havoc in other countries, including Germany. I speak of proportional representation. When you have proportional representation, virtually any kind of coalition can happen.
Anything can happen. No, you're absolutely right. Jacob, let's take some questions. We'll put you on the hot seat for a minute, and then we'll be finishing with this episode. We'll let you have final say and encouraging believers at the end. So here are the questions. We thank you so much for those who sent in the questions. Such a blessing to not only participate, engage with you, but also with Jacob. So thank you for sending the questions. Jacob, are pro-green Western politicians being paid off by pro-green companies? Interesting. Politicians and companies going along.
Well, we saw that with Obama. Obama took his taxpayer money, gave a subsidy to a company that was involved in the manufacture of solar panels. These solar panels, of course, were actually made in China. And the executives of the company were paid bonuses by the company after they got the federal funding. They were paid bonuses, and they made contributions to the Democratic Party to Obama's reelection. So it's already happened.
Yeah, that was that Solyndra company that nobody ever saw the money after that. It went missing. Absolutely right. Jacob, second question: Are you aware of the new Calvinistic push for postmillennialism? Oh, this is interesting. We talked about postmillennialism a while ago. It's resurgent. So, are you aware of the new push by the Calvinists into postmillennialism? What is postmillennialism? I guess
I wouldn't call it a new push. It's a push, but it's always been there. If you don't know what postmillennialism is, it is the most ridiculous, illogical, unpalatable plate of nonsense that only a fool would ingest. If Satan is bound, I want to know who keeps letting him go. If Satan is bound, please tell me who keeps letting him go.
So it's the idea that we're in the millennium, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amillennialism says there is no millennium. That's an error. Postmillennialism says there is one and it's happening. It is insanity. One of the people who promoted is, of course, Chris Roseborough, the Lutheran. You know, the guy with the four-letter words and all that vulgarity and stuff. That guy.
Yeah.
With his son, they, you know, F you and go get F'd and all that. That's how they talk. But he teaches this, and there's people who will believe it. Another school of Calvinistic thought who believe it were the Reconstructionist followers of the late Rousas Rushdoony. People like Greg Bonson, Gary North. I think he's deceased now. Greg Bonson.
D. James Kennedy.
D. James Kennedy, absolutely. And there was another, David Childwall, I think. Chilton. David, yeah. These people are Reconstructionists. They believe, like the Puritans in Salem, Massachusetts, or like the Calvinists in Calvin's day in Geneva, that the church or their church must take over the institutions of government and economy, and culture, and so forth, and establish the Christian kingdom so Christ can return. Jesus is coming for a triumphant church. Now, these crazy ideas have been adopted by hyper-charismatics who are caught up in dominion theology, kingdom theology. They've taken their eschatology, oddly, from these hyper-Calvinists who are even more ironically cessationists, but that's where they got their eschatology. One example would be Rick Godwin in Texas. He's a charismatic, lunatic fringe charismatic, but he gets his eschatology from these Reconstructionist Calvinists who are post-millennial.
This is the whole idea of theonomy, right, Jacob? The whole idea of theonomy.
Yeah, theonomic reconstruction of theonomy. Yes.
All right, Jacob. After last night's speech, I'm terrified for the safety of law-abiding citizens. How much more can transpire throughout the world, in the Middle East and in America before the white horse? Let's talk about Revelation 6.
That is a good question. We don't know, but as I've been saying for some time, those four horsemen are mounted up. When they're going to begin their gallop is not for me to say, but they're on the horizon today.
Yeah. Jacob, do you think the Antichrist and false prophet scenario will involve AI computer image?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does the mark of the beast relate somehow to the census that David took in 2 Samuel, and why was it so sinful in the sight of the Lord?
We talk about that on our teaching, the second sin of David. It's available on the Morio website, the second sin of David. You can listen to it, and we address that issue.
All right. It's relatable for sure. But we'll go find out. Second Samuel is on the Memorial website. Since Antichrist,
it's called the second sin of David.
Second sin of David.
Yes, first sin was Bathsheba. This was his other sin, numbering the people when God didn't tell him to do it.
Amen. Since Christ mimics Jesus and is in the spirit of Judas, will he be a false Christian teacher or leader of some kind? Talk about the Antichrist.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'd point you to our book, Shadows of the Beast.
Amen. Jacob, is it possible Neom City, which is that in Saudi Arabia, could potentially be Babylon to be rebuilt?
That is a theory that does not lack plausibility. What is really interesting is it is on the location of the probable, if not certain location, of the original Mount Sinai where the Ten Commandments were given.
Yeah, that in itself was really interesting.
That in itself, yes.
Yeah. Jacob, will Chaldean people have an exodus back to Iraq?
In the millennial reign of Christ, I believe some of them will, but don't forget there are Assyrian Christians, and a number of them are saved Pentecostals. You've got a Catholic kind of Eastern Catholicism version, which is with the icons and liturgies and so forth. but you also have an Aramaic speaking Pentecostal church
Praise
of
God.
people who have Chaldean descent. And I've spoken at one of their churches of immigrants in Australia once. So yeah, I believe during the millennial reign of Christ, those people will be returned to their land.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, you're off the hot seat. That's all the questions we have. I'll turn it back to you and you can close out the program.
Look, the corruption of the American government makes my blood boil. The lies of the mainstream media are frustrating and they get me so angry and disturbed. And the state of the church. You look, there's another lawsuit last week or the week before last against Hillsong for financial corruption. A church that is so lukewarm and is oblivious to the realities in which we live. But the Lord will have a people for his own name. He will have a faithful people. And it is my prayer that by his grace, you and I and our families will be part of it. May he keep us in his hand, in the hand of Jesus, until Jesus returns. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless.
Thank you so much.
Hope we see you in New York, LA, wherever, Ohio. God bless.
Amen. From coast to coast, Jacob, from coast to coast. Jacob, so much for staying up with us. Thank you, everyone, for being on there. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Davey. What a blessing to be with you guys. And thank you for all those who watch and will watch later. God bless you. Our aim and goal for our program is so you get close to Jesus, to trust in him. And if you don't know Christ, put your faith and trust in him. If you do know Christ, then get close to Jesus also and proclaim the true gospel before he comes.
Put your faith in Jesus. He died in your place and in mine, and he rose to give me eternal life and to give you eternal life. There is no other way. Transhumanism will never give life eternal, but the death and resurrection of Jesus will.